over to our guests. I'd like to introduce someone who needs no introduction, and that is our local MP for Lismore, Janelle Suffin, to have a word with you.
I just checked the timing. Ellie said about 5 minutes, so I'm sure she'll time me. And oh, Jenny is, okay. I can have 7. So firstly, even though Uncle Mick's gone, I want to acknowledge his welcome to country, and I acknowledge him as Uncle Mick, Elder and Auntie Thelma, but as my long-term close friends Mick and Thelma, so it was nice to have him be able to do the welcome to country today. And I was saying to Ellie earlier that I'd composed about 10 sort of speeches in my head that I wanted to give today, and I still haven't landed on one as I come to the microphone. So there's so many things that I'd really like to share, but today is a day of sharing with all the contributors here, and we have so many, as I say, it's a great gathering of the grandees of disaster resilience, preparedness, planning, prevention, recovery, all of the things that go into this space. When I was appointed as Parliamentary Secretary for Disaster Recovery, I said that I see my role as one looking at preparedness, response and then recovery, because the recovery is shaped by everything that goes before it. And we've been in a recovery that's being shaped as we go along, instead of some of that essential planning and preparedness that happened before, but everybody here is sort of aware of that. And over the years, and particularly the last few years, but even before that, I've met many experts and would-be experts in this broad area, but I've yet to see an expertly responded to and planned for disaster event. And I know that that's what we're all working on at a collective level across the Northern Rivers and even broader across the state. When I was driving here, there was on the ABC, they were talking about Richie Williamson, the member for Clarence. He actually he said, very simple question. He said, why do we need a DA, a development application, to rebuild Broadwater School? And I thought, good question, but more than that, it is the question. Because yes, we need development applications, you know, we need all of those things, but we're rebuilding 9 schools. And why do we need a fully fledged development application to rebuild the schools, not all, but most of them, back exactly where they were, but being built more resilient to disasters? And you know, I'm aware of these things, we all are as community leaders, but when you hear it put so simply, and what that speaks to is what I call BOW, business as usual. So a lot of machinery of government, responses, architecture, all the things that happen are done in what I call BOW, the business as usual, and disasters are anything but business as usual. And I have interactions, meetings, all sorts of engagements, particularly with bureaucracy and with great people, good people, but the whole thinking and the machinery of government around it is very much shaped around business as usual. And somehow we have to change our cognition, our thinking. It's anything but business as usual. And I see it in meetings I'm at, in a meeting I was at yesterday. Joanna was there too, and I think she felt my, I was pissed off, okay? So she gave me a big hug this morning because she could feel it, you know, over the Teams meeting. And so when we get together and we do all of this planning and discussion and distilling and debate and discourse, I really want us to be mindful about business as usual and what's really required when we have disasters, and it starts before disasters. So we just have to, you know, tweak it, change it, and think, how do we do it? One of the things I try and communicate is that we it's one of the few recoveries I've seen without a recovery plan. There is one done now, but it's done after the event. Normally we do one at the beginning. And I said, for goodness sake, if Cabonne Shire Council could do one, why couldn't we, for the region? And we are. And the person doing it is doing an absolute great job of it, but it's describing what's already happened, and then we'll look at the gaps, and then we'll look at the way forward. The other thing that I saw missing in recovery, and I've seen this not just here, but in other areas, was not having a standalone recovery coordinator. We sort of had one who arrived 10 days after the event, but so was not helpful. And then we got someone, we actually got a cop, Assistant Commissioner Mal Lanyon, who was terrific and well regarded by everybody, because I know in this space people say sometimes, oh, we don't want a cop. Well, sometimes we do want a cop when we get a good cop, okay? And I acknowledge Mark here today, one of our good cops. And but then he got taken from us in the August, and we really haven't had one since. We've got a wonderful woman, Susie George, she's here somewhere, I saw her, and she's tasked with delivery for the North. 2 minutes, right? And that's been sort of lumped onto her as well, and she's doing a fantastic job. So I just want to share some of these things that I'm working in at the moment. My role is one of coordination with the Northern Rivers Recovery, also to advise and assist at state level. So what I'd like to see come out of today, and I mean it's your session, not mine, is a plan of action, but a call to action, because we still need it. And I'd also like to see a communique, and not just the blah, blah, blah recommendations that go and sit on a shelf, because I've seen a lot of those, and I keep asking the question on our behalf and on behalf of the state. The inquiries from the bushfire 2019, there were lessons identified, but not lessons learned. And I didn't say that, people before me have said it, but that's what I'm finding. So we do have two really good inquiries. We have the Legislative Council one. We have the O'Kane 4 one, great recommendations. In interactions I'm in with government and everyone, I keep saying, show me where they're reflected. Where are they reflected in the State Recovery Plan? Where are they reflected in the State Disaster Management Plan? I need a magnifying glass sometimes to find them, but I'm on the case and I won't go away until we get those things to happen. Close, okay, I have to close. And with those words, I wish you well. I know that, look, there's some fantastic people here. You'll have great ideas. You've got great experience. So share it and come out with a great communique for our way forward. Thank you.
Janelle has just worked so incredibly hard for the last 2 years. She's been on the front line. She's been going above and beyond. Her new role with the government is really, really important and comes from lived experience. So this is for all of your hard work. We love you, Janelle. Thank you so much for everything you do for us. What a warrior, and so lucky that we have Janelle fighting for us in government. So, on to our next speaker. So I'm very pleased to introduce Megan Nicholson from NCOS, the New South Wales Council of Social Service. We've been very lucky to work pretty closely with Megan in this project, and NCOS are such, again, fierce advocates for the social services sector, for the community sector, and I'd like to hand over to Megan to talk a little bit more about our project and the work they do.
Good morning, everybody. Look, I'm delighted to be on Bundjalung country and like to thank Uncle Mick for the welcome and for their wonderful dance performance this morning. I was thinking, wouldn't it be great if we could start every day with dance and a bit of music? And I'd just like to say I feel really honoured to be on a on a stage with such an august group of women, Janelle Saffin, Joanna Quilty and Ellie Bird, who've really made such a huge contribution in advocating for communities and the community sector organisations through recent disasters and being a part of systemic change in our approach to disasters and preparedness. I also want to acknowledge my colleague Eleanor Harris from NCOS and Bronwyn Hutchings, who is here somewhere, from the Local Community Service Association. NCOS is really pleased to be leading the Community Sector Disaster Capability Project. It's such a mouthful. With our partners LCSA and ABSEC, and working closely with local organisations such as Resilient Lismore and their local partners. And just to tell you a little bit about how the project came about, it was born out of the experience of recent disasters and our realisation in the sector that things really needed to change. And I won't labour the point. I've got a whole list of all the things that were wrong. I'm going to skip those because I think everybody knows that. But as a sector, we navigated opaque systems and built new relationships and knowledge, applied for a lot of grants, applied for more grants, and all the while responding to and advocating for people who have been impacted and dealing with our own impacts ourselves. So it became clear to us, and this is documented through a lot of research and reports, some that NCOS has produced and others, that our sector has a really important role to play in disasters, in all phases of disasters, particularly in being prepared in the future. And this role is not just about continuity of service delivery, although that is important. It's about bringing the expertise of all the many organisations in our sector to the work of preparedness and resilience, particularly in relation to those most vulnerable. So it's really about a different approach, working with communities and local organisations from the ground up to build preparedness and resilience. And it's also the project is about sector advocacy, so that you've got on-the-ground projects doing the work, and that informs NCOS, LCSA, ABSEC's advocacy at the state level. So a little bit about the project. Ellie's done some of the blurb, government funded, New South Wales, Commonwealth. The project is about building both capacity, systems and preparedness. So our organisations and communities and emergency management systems are better prepared. So it's, big vision. So there's three broad areas that the project is working in. One is around the capacities of community organisations and services. And so this summit is exactly that work, building capacities and knowledge and the opportunity to network. The second is about the preparedness and resilience of communities, working with particularly those most vulnerable at risk. And I'm really pleased that Tracy Compton from the project in the snowy Monero is part of a breakout session today, talking about the group work model that she's developed for doing preparedness, informed by the PSEP tools. And the third element of the project is better connections with the emergency management sector and a two-way conversation. And one of the things that the project, 2 minutes already. One of the things that the project has developed is this notion of vulnerability literacy. So really informing and changing the attitudes of government and emergency management because they kind of don't get it. And I'm sure many of you know that. And just a quick ad for our session tomorrow. The new NCOS CEO, Cara Varian, will be here, and we're running a session that's exploring advocacy messages. So those of you interested in the sort of statewide advocacy, please do come along. The project is being run in 3 locations, Northern Rivers, focused on 3 LGAs, South Coast, Noe Monero area and Hawkesbury LGA. Each project is looking at around mapping and identifying risks and vulnerabilities as well as strengths locally, delivering capacity building and engaging the emergency management sector and trying to get into those governance structures and committees and connections in that space. And so just my concluding reflection really comes out of my attendance at the Australian Disaster Resilience Conference last year, where I thought it's a really weird mix of people. It's, you know, emergency services in uniforms and there's big machinery displays and there's these data experts and scientists and geographers, and then there's the bureaucrats and the comms people, and then there's kind of us, like neighbourhood centres and social services and peak bodies such as NCOS, all there. And the challenge is, I think, to communicate across different cultures and language and silos, and that is an imperative that we all need to do. And I think there's goodwill there. We all share a similar objective, but it's about building those connections. And I see this summit as a milestone in working towards that. Thank you.
So they all want to run away before I get a chance to give them their gifts, but here you go. I have to say that little bag is one of the cutest gift bags I've ever seen at a summit or at a conference. So unpack it with joy. It's full of mementos of the Northern Rivers, and we're so grateful that you've come to spend some time with us. And finally, for this morning, before we get into our keynote presentation, I'd like to introduce Joanna Quilty. Joanna is the Head of Preparedness and Recovery with the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority. Lots of work ahead, and we're very grateful to have you here with us today. Thanks, Joanna.
Thanks very much, Ali, and it's fantastic to be here joining you all here on Bundjalung country and to have had such a great welcome to country from Uncle Mick and a lovely cultural experience with those young dancers. Look, it is no secret that disasters are increasing in their frequency and severity due to both population change or growth and climate change. Since 2019, practically every community across New South Wales has experienced a disaster, and the 2019 flooding events alone meant that 98 out of 128 local government areas in New South Wales were impacted, and none more so than up here in the Northern Rivers. And it was really that experience that highlighted the fundamental flaws and failings of our emergency management system, and yet the strength, the resilience and the life-saving ability of community-led initiatives. And it was out of that experience and the relentless advocacy of people like Janelle Saffin that there was a strong sense and momentum towards doing disasters differently. And so out of that was established the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority. And while our name suggests that it is all about building and physical infrastructure, in fact, the legislation that Janelle fought so hard to get up says that our role is about promoting community resilience. And certainly that is through recovery and it's through reconstruction, but it's also through preparedness, mitigation, adaptation, all those things that Janelle mentioned need to happen before a disaster strikes. And I think the other really important thing about the establishment of the Reconstruction Authority is that when the legislation that sets out our functions really talks about things like supporting, collaborating, enabling community participation, building community capacity, all of those ground up things so that it's no longer intended to be just a top-down response. The establishment of the Reconstruction Authority is one thing. Certainly changing systems doesn't happen overnight. And I know that in so many respects, recovery is still a painful and way too slow journey. But hang in there, please, Janelle. And we are so lucky that we do have her keeping us on our toes, redirecting us where that needs to happen, and really helping get this system into shape. It is a slow journey. Change doesn't happen overnight, but I do believe that we will get there. One of the recent things that I would like to highlight that I think is really important is the State Disaster Mitigation Plan, which was released last month. By no means a perfect document, but it does consider the state's exposure to a range of natural hazards such as bushfires and floods. It looks at how those exposures are going to change over time, and it identifies how we need to both reduce that exposure but also reduce our vulnerability. And it presents a range of options, almost a toolbox of options from which to choose in order to achieve that. And I think really importantly, it doesn't just focus on infrastructure solutions. It doesn't just focus on even the natural environment and solutions there. It looks at social interventions. It looks at things like community-led initiatives, investing in social infrastructure, really building social cohesion. And that's what the NCOS project is all about. That's what this summit is all about. I think too often these initiatives are so close to the ground that they're not really seen, they're not given the regard that they need to be. So I think for me, being here, it really is that very strong reminder. It's an opportunity to learn. I thank you all for the fabulous work that you do, and I'm really looking forward to the next couple of days. Thank you.
It's like I have to chase them across the stage, isn't it? All right, yeah, you get one too. One of my favourite things in that bag is an apron with a map of the Northern Rivers so that they can always remember the extent of the impact that happened here just 2 years ago. Very briefly on that note, I just want to acknowledge that we have, yes, beautiful, modelled by Joanna there. I just want to acknowledge that we are at just beyond 2 years from that significant disaster that many of us here in this room lived through. There are people with us today who were directly affected, and so I just want to acknowledge the journey we've all been on together and the journey that we have ahead of us. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.